Good morning, Alan. No, he's muted, but he said hi.
Alan, can we just verify that you can, that we've got your sound and everything?
Yep. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you. How about you as well, Becca? We see you now. Can you turn your mic on?
Yes, of course. And I think there's a delay in that room, so I have learned to pause. Good morning.
Thank you. So I don't know if you want to do that when Wendy pops on too, but.
All of you who are on Zoom, we're waiting for Barb and Marcy. We don't know if they're calling in or showing up, so we'll give them a couple of minutes. Good morning, Barb.
Morning.
Have you heard from Marcy? Because we have not.
No, she didn't reach out to me. She might be concerned about getting out in the weather. I don't know. Would you like me to call her?
Yes, please do.
Okay,
She may be having trouble with the Zoom.
okay.
Now I'm seeing your message, Farley. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order while we get Marcy in the room. It is what time? I have no 8:32. 8:32. Ask for public comment. I don't see anybody on the Zoom, but if there is someone who'd like to make a comment, okay, seeing no comments. Yeah. All right, moving along, I'll ask for approval of the April minutes and the April 21st minutes and May 2nd minutes. Any comments or questions about either set of minutes? Motion to approve.
So moved.
And a second by Farley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any? Oh, yeah. You
And
weren't at the
neither
special
was
meeting.
I. So I'd say
Marcy's joining us now.
Okay, so John and Alan are abstaining from voting on the May 2nd minutes because they were not in attendance. Okay, let's move on to the March financial report. Anne.
Yes, so what you have is March. We haven't gotten April done yet. It shows a fund balance of 973,000. We did make the final payment on the demo to Paragon of 82,000 at the end of April. So the fund balance will drop to something in the high to mid 800s. And you can see the activity, which is minimal. On the last page, we've collected a small part of the 115,000 in property taxes and have mostly the expenditures are just normal things with the first payment on, or the first 2023 payment to Paragon of 85,261 with 82,000 to follow. Be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Ann? I do have one. Since we've all just suffered the news about our own property tax increases,
Right.
is that considered tax increment to the URA if the assessed value of properties goes up along the avenue as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything from the base.
Okay. So while we may be suffering personally, there's something for the URA to look forward to next year. Is that the
Right.
news?
Right.
That's the news. Okay, thank you. Old business, let's hear from, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Motion to
I
accept.
move we accept the financial reports.
Thank you. Second? Second by Marcy. All those in favor of accepting the March reports? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Now, old business. Becca, how are we doing on the bridge and the Spirit of Manitou?
Yes, thank you very much for asking. So what we're looking at for the bridge is installation the first 2 weeks of July. And what we're anticipating is all 3 will be fully installed and ready for ribbon cutting, timed with the city's Day of Friendship celebration at Fields Park on Saturday, July 29th. So if we break apart those 3 projects, what I'll say is that we're anticipating installation of Whirlwind Juniper. That's the piece currently slated for the Holiday Inn Express. I have been working with the property owner and the city and the county to complete the easement process and pour the pedestal. So we're anticipating that that will happen sometime this month or in June, and that piece is complete. So I'm ready to share that if you would like to see it.
Yes, please.
All right, let me share my screen here. There we go. So this was the concept, which I'm sure you all recall. And this was the concept that the artist submitted along with some of the dimensions. So essentially what we're looking at is this gorgeous steel and juniper piece. And he was able to submit an image here from his workshop. There we go. So let me zoom in a bit. You can see the shapes match pretty closely to what he was thinking. So it's currently curing. He won't be able to transport it until June, but we're pretty pleased with this. Our public art committee still needs to issue a final acceptance. They haven't been able to see it yet, but I did want to preview it with all of you.
Becca, it's
Becca, is that all steel?
Thanks for asking, Barb. So actually, I can show you better with the schematic. Let me switch back over here. So what the artist is showing is that the construction of it, the base is the steel frame. It gives it a great deal of tensile strength. And then what's wrapped around it is natural juniper that weathers naturally and beautifully and doesn't rot. So what you get is a mix of industrial and natural materials.
So it's lovely. If for some reason it would be tagged or marked in some way, is it going to be cleanable?
Yes. So the artist anticipates that all sculptures have those kinds of issues. before we accepted them and finalized the winners of each of these proposals, we did ask them for an entire plan for maintenance and other small acts of vandalism, the kinds of usual wear and tear that you see with a public art installation. So he has an entire care plan that we will maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Becca? Marcy, can you need to turn your microphone on.
I didn't hear the dates clearly
Oh, for the celebration, July 29th
for all of them.
for all of them.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Becca?
I think
Anything else?
just to make sure that I'm also tracking the other projects for you. We're looking at installation of the bench, the Columbine bench, Wild Contemplation. That's looking to be the week of June 25th. So I'm working with the Parks Department and our Public Works Department on that particular pedestal pour. But I met with the artist last week. She came out from Missouri to visit the site, and she's really, really excited about the location. What we'll need to do, and we're working with her on this, is just provide some signage that reminds people it's for sitting on and not for climbing on. So she was lightly concerned about its proximity to the playground, but with signage, she feels far more comfortable. So she's thrilled about that. And she is hoping to also make our ribbon cutting celebration in July. She doesn't have her work in progress or finalized photos yet, so I can't share it with you, but I think she's really motivated by the fact that the fence is down and that we are basically waiting on her to be able to proceed. So then I also heard from Javier Rocabado, and his tiles are nearly complete. So he's working on the grouting and basically allowing everything to cure. And so he's looking to come out, I think I mentioned those first 2 weeks of July.
Terrific. Any questions or comments?
Did we have a plaque that was made, Jim, for the installation on the bridge as well?
Barb, the plaque is just basically in recognition of Marcy Morrison.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about the artwork.
Is that in place? I haven't looked for it, but
Is it?
Oh, the plaque has been in place, yeah, for quite a
Oh.
while.
so Becca, will we have some recognition of the artist anywhere? Okay.
Yeah, and actually I do need to ask you, Jim, offline about where to install the kind of plaques that we create for those installations, because it will be a very lasting installation, and I want to make sure that it's going in the best place possible.
Okay. Anything else? Becca, thanks for those updates. We appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to share. Happy weekend.
Thank you. You as well. Status of the La Fun project, Jim.
They're still negotiating a possible deal, which I can't go into a lot of detail on because they have a confidentiality agreement with the potential tenant. But they're a little further apart on the finances of that between the tenant and Paragon to make it actually work right now. So they're possibly considering adding another tenant to try to make that work a little bit better. But that's where they are right now. So again, they're apart on the numbers a little bit, but they're trying to make it work.
Any questions? Comments?
I guess
Okay.
generally, is it, without any disclosures, is it something we would be supportive of personally?
I'm not going to guess that, but I think so. I think so.
Okay. next, if there are no questions for Jim about the fund, the next discussion is about the city council meeting on the 2nd of May. And most of you were there with the exception of John and Alan. So what say you all? I mean, we had our conversation with them. We left that meeting with the council giving direction to the staff to investigate the particulars of the memo that we had submitted. There was to be some follow-up discussion with us, and I think that's happened. Is that right, Ann and Jim? So I'll let you talk about that in a minute. And then the only other news that I have heard on the grapevine is that the council had asked for a special work session to follow up and discuss this further. And I believe that has now been set for June 13th. Is that right? So our continued discussion is on the council work session agenda for June 13th. And the only other update that I know of before we have general discussion is for Ann and or Jim to talk about their discussion with the staff about the finances.
I can do that. So Jim and I did meet with Denise and Becca and kind of went over point by point what information they should be aware of in terms of financial impacts regarding dissolution of the URA for the most part, I think. And a lot of discussion because there's a lot of lack of clarity around property tax and how that works. Clearly, the sales tax, the city's going to end up with one way or the other. But we did, I think, get Becca in pretty good shape to write this memo that will accompany the item on the 13th. She will circulate it to Jim and I to make sure she understood the information we provided. But I think it will be a very useful and enlightening, hopefully, memo for council.
And after that meeting, I followed up with Becca because she asked me to give her some information, including the exact language out of the statute. So I gave her that to show that what happens, you have the two options. Council can either replace the board with themselves or they can dissolve it, and there's steps involved. So she has all that, and I think she will specifically list that in her report. And then also I gave her the updated pro forma information that I recalculated based on the Holiday Inn's current revenue stream. We have 10 months of sales tax revenue off of that. So you can kind of extrapolate from that for what a year revenue would be. And actually they are running ahead of what the original pro forma was put together in 2019. And they're earning probably close to 30% more if the numbers hold through the end of May.
That's good news. Okay, questions about that?
I have a question about that. So can you tell me what that means from our obligations and I assume the additional.
It doesn't really change anything as far as because the way the agreement reads is basically if we get the sales tax revenue and we get property tax revenue, then we will give them all of it up until we reach the cap of 2.5 million total. When I ran the numbers and I carried it all the way out for the next 8 years, we will never reach that number.
Okay. So it's basically a pass-through situation and it's to their advantage to do well, of course. And in long term, it's to the city's advantage that they do well.
Well, of course, I mean, again, after 8 years, the agreement ends, but all that revenue continues.
Right. Okay, thank you.
From my perspective, the big issue for the Holiday Inn is that if they are doing better than expected, they will recoup more funds. And the reassessed value of the property will also give them more back, right? The yeah, they're paying it in, but they're getting it back. But at least there's a bigger wash than there would have been in other situations, right? Like it is to their advantage to be doing better in that respect. So the other issue for us potentially is, what do we want to do in response to the news that there is a council work session on the 13th of June, when our meeting is that Friday? Is that right? Would that be our June meeting? I won't be there. I know that. So I think that's right. It must be that. Is that right?
That's on my calendar. June 16th.
Yes. So June 16th would be our regular meeting. Is it to our advantage at all to meet before the council work session, assuming we would have a staff packet so that we can discuss it and not be in the situation we were in this last time where we had to call a special meeting?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have the staff packet by the 8th, right? Right. Friday before.
Which is actually the 9th.
Oh, excuse me, which is actually, sorry. So we would only have,
A
Really?
couple of days.
yeah. We could meet on that Monday, I suppose.
Is that a possibility for everyone to have? I don't know that can we change our regularly scheduled meeting and hold it early? Hold it on Monday instead of Friday?
Good.
This may not be a big deal. It may be that we're just going and we're listening and we're responding to questions. But if we do want an opportunity to talk about it, that would be it. That would be our opportunity.
Yeah, we could just do a Zoom meeting on the 12th, which I think is easier for everybody. Yeah.
A Zoom meeting on the 12th and then hold the regularly scheduled meeting on the 16th, do the regular business on the 16th. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Do both.
So we do both.
Because I think the one on the 12th will be relatively quick.
I think so too. But it would make me feel more confident if we met and had a conversation about the contents of the staff information. Okay. So Jim, can you do a poll for all of us and figure out, I mean, an 8:30 time on Monday, the 12th would work for me, but I don't know if that works for everyone else.
Does 8:30 work for everyone?
Does it? If we avoid the poll, can that work?
It's a lot easier to do it now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Is there a reason we can't have the full meeting?
It's up to you. As long as we post it,
It's
we're
okay
fine.
with me. Yeah, to do our regular meeting on the 12th, 8:30 Monday morning.
Looks like everybody can.
Let's go for it.
Okay, then we'll scratch this, the 16th. Okay.
And we'll check to see if
I'll check to see
it's a
the
regular
availability.
meeting, let's check to see if we can use this facility. Otherwise, it'll be Zoom only.
Because this may not be.
I'll find out. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. Any further discussion? I mean, that if anyone else has comments about the May 2nd meeting or questions, John, from you or Ellen?
Well, my question is about the change in meeting date. Do we have to have a motion to do that, or is it just an advertising issue?
I'm going with consensus,
Okay,
as long as we posted. We only in our bylaws, we only have to have an annual meeting, as I recall.
okay.
And then we have to have regularly scheduled meetings, but just a few of them, it doesn't say there aren't any rules about how to do that.
I'll
do
just,
have-
make-
I
I'll
do
make
have-
sure it's posted, you know, and if we have to change locations.
I do have a question about the council work session.
Yes.
Can you inform me what the discussion was about either expanding the URA or creating an additional URA area? And where that might be?
The conversation was general. And as I recall, and you all should weigh in as well, it was centered around two things. The comments that we were getting from council was about the fact that the URA only benefits a certain number of commercial properties in Manitou, and it would be great if it would extend arch to arch and serve all the businesses of Manitou. So that was the desire. And then the issue is the fact that we'd lose all the tax increment with any change to the current East Side plan if that were just expanded. And the development of a new district means we would be in the same situation we were in for the first half life of this URA, which is that there was no tax increment. And I'll leave it at that. Other comments from the rest of you about that conversation, that part of the conversation?
I think my comment would be they've actually got way off topic and focused mostly on the LaFawn agreement,
Yes.
which some council members had, some didn't. And so they really just spent a lot of time discussing what we had heard months ago about their dissatisfaction with the LaFawn agreement, which really wasn't the topic of the
Right.
exercise at all. So there wasn't a lot of, I think, focused discussion about dissolving the URA, expanding the boundaries, making themselves the governing body. Really limited, if any, discussion.
Yeah.
on that.
So, I mean, the basis of my question is this: I'm trying to determine what it is that council thinks might benefit the city for either expanding the urban renewal district or creating a new district. And in part, I asked this question because I get my car serviced at Manitou Auto, and I walked home from that, and I didn't see any opportunities in that stretch to really benefit, to redevelop properties or develop vacant properties. There just isn't any, in my opinion. And I'm just wonder what the vision is here, or maybe there isn't one.
You know, and we try to put in the memo that that's kind of problematic. Because when you do form a new URA, the mechanics of it are you're actually, if you're going to include the current URA in that boundary, then you need to dissolve the current urban renewal area and then form a brand new one that covers all the new area. And then, as Ann said, the base is reset. So you're at zero as far as tax increment. And then the other thing that makes it more difficult is when you are now under the current law, when you're now making a new URA, you have to negotiate tax sharing agreements with the taxing entities, meaning El Paso County, school district, and the two special districts. You have to show them what the impact to their sales tax property tax revenue would be. And as you just pointed out, unless you have a project that you know is going to come in and put in so many square feet of retail and nobody can run a number. So you can't tell them that this is what your property tax would be on that area and how much you'd be actually giving up to the URA for that period. You can't do it. So how do you do a tax sharing agreement when you don't have a project?
Thanks. I mean, I've thought of this always as we would create, if this were to go, if anything like this would go forward, would be to create a new district and leave the current district in place the way it is, and it would expire in the 8 years or what have you. So I'm looking at it from that standpoint only. But on the, say, the avenue to Manitou Motors anyhow, and probably a little bit beyond, I just don't see any opportunities there. There may be some on the west end.
Yeah, you
I
could
just looked at
actually create a separate urban renewal area
that.
that doesn't include the current one. And so the
Right.
current one would run its course. But the new one would have the same problem.
Have the same problem.
Yeah, yeah. Debbie Allen has a.
Yeah, Alan Gregory, and then Alan, you had a comment?
Am I mistaken? I seem to recall that the topic of needing a new blight study was at least mentioned in that meeting.
You're right. Thank you, Alan. That's true. We did talk about the fact that a blight study could be upwards of $50,000 to complete and would likely take a couple of years. Did we say that out loud to
Yes,
them? That was sort of our.
We said that, I believe we said that out loud to them.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other comments generally about the meeting?
I'm good.
Alan Dewitt.
Yeah, the only thing, I think when the discussion of expanding or changing the URA was discussed, it wasn't just that area from the overpass to downtown. It was arch to arch. And
Right.
that would be, that I think the argument was being made that there's lots of properties throughout the commercial zones that might need help. And the other comment that I do think was interesting was that there was a poll of council on should there be a first reading of an ordinance to dissolve, and that got 2 votes or 2 people saying they would want to do that.
Yes, and with the majority of the rest of council saying we want more information before we move in any particular direction. Was that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay, other comments? Marcy?
I would just add a little comment that for those of us who were around at that period of time, what this council did not realize is that the downtown merchants at that time did not want an organization like this. They were absolutely against it because there was a great deal of discussion whether or not it would pay. Times were not as good as they have been recently, business-wise. And they were, I think, not comfortable with the idea of another organization that to them seemed like another city organization that they would have to be involved with. And as it is getting city businesses involved, I think Nancy would agree with me, is difficult in city, establishing city changes to some area of this of our city. At least that's what it was during that period of time. They really was not interested in seeing any changes made by another organization coming in and in their minds telling them what to do. So that was the period of time. Then obviously things have changed.
Yes.
But that's how they felt about it. And it was very, very clear.
That's useful history, Marcy. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I took away from the meeting as well is that there were a number of council members who shared my perspective that what we really should be doing is waiting for this DDA consultant project to get off the ground and look at all of these issues as sort of a basket of economic development tools that could be deployed and let somebody else besides any of us who all have strong opinions about what might be possible in Manitou have a fresh set of eyes come in and say, here are the pros and cons of each one of these alternatives so that we could all take a look together and assess business interests. Because Marcy, you're absolutely right. If property owners and business tenants aren't interested in these tools, it's really difficult to make them work without business interest. Anything else? Okay, so we're waiting for the staff report. We're moving our regular meeting to the 12th of June. We'll take it up again then. And we'll keep you posted if we hear anything else that might require your thoughtful attention between now and then. We'll just keep you posted. All right, Jim, your report.
Well, we've discussed a lot that I've been working on. And we will talk a little bit more about the annual report. And I see Carol joined us, so we'll defer till Carol comes on and talks about where we are with that. Like Ann said, we met with the finance director and city administrator about the URA commitments, financial commitments. I've been working with the DDA committee. The RFP has been drafted and I believe city staff is working on a map of what that area, the study area would be. And I try to point out to make it clear that, you know, when you do a map like that, sometimes people look into those things and say that's a given. And really it's just a study area and that it could change based on the consultant's work. So we'll see about that. But I think it's going to come out probably within the next week or so. I mean, I think it's moving along pretty well. Natalie did a great job of putting all the thoughts together into an RFP. So that's coming. And, you know, as a result of all the council discussions, I've revised the Holiday Inn financials, and also we did have 3 scenarios that Paragon had given us for development of the LaFawn. So I went back and, you know, looked at those numbers again too, and put together what I projected out for the next 8 years. And, you know, it's a significant amount of sales tax, depending on what development it would be. And also it could be a significant amount of property tax. And the thing that hopefully Becca will point out in her memo is that the bulk of the property tax, of course, is to the county and to the school district. That's where your property taxes go, right? So if council were to dissolve it, and that would go away. All that property tax revenue would no longer come to the URA because there wouldn't be one. And it would go to back to the taxing entities if they went with the dissolving approach, which could be a lot of money. So anyhow, and that, if you remember the development agreement, we upfronted the money that we gave Paragon. So all that money would come back to the URA for other projects. And that's pretty much it. And then we'll talk about the facade site improvement grant application that I hopefully, sorry to send it out so late, but hopefully we got a chance to look at that. So that's what I've been working on.
Any questions for Jim?
I have one question. Jim, do you feel that, or all of you were there, do you feel the council understood the breakout of where the dollars would be going? Do you think that, maybe I should ask our councilwoman, do you think they understood what happens if you dissolve this organization and what ends up happening in terms of where the money goes?
No, that's
Jim?
exactly why I think it got postponed or asked for a work session to get answers to those sorts of questions, get fidelity on that. So I think that there is a much increase after that meeting. I think that there was a much increased interest in getting more information and understanding exactly the mechanics of the URA and the funding a lot better. That was my sense. Did that answer your question, Marcy?
Well, I'm hoping that that's where if they understood that. I mean, I understood, well, that's different. But I mean, I wondered if it really penetrated, okay, we put the URA out of business and then we get the money. And that's not.
Yeah, I don't think that was immediately apparent, but I think that there was a opening, a glimmer of, oh, wait, we better hold up because we could lose a lot of money here. We need to get more details.
So there was that feeling.
I certainly got that
Well,
feeling.
you know them better.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
For most of them anyway.
Other comments or questions for Jim? Okay, hearing none. Let's move along to Carol, who's joined us on Zoom to talk about the communication plan.
Yep. So as far as the annual report, we are almost ready to get started working on it. So Debbie, I think Jim has a director's letter in front of you for approval. Once that's approved, that goes in. Jim has given me good language to be able to address the improvements in sales tax revenue. So I'll put that into a little blurb and add that. I have the updated projects and stuff from the last project plan, and I have connected with Becca, but have not yet received information on, I guess there haven't been any art installations since the last annual report, but there are some coming later this summer. So she's going to get me some information on that, as well as get me some information on the pollination station. And once I have that, we can get it designed. Once everything's in place. Oh, and then maybe once it stops raining, I'll take some photographs because right now it's not real pretty. But we should probably have the first round back to you guys once I have that information within a week.
And where are you in terms of how this would be disseminated?
Oh, yeah, I would say, I think we'll work with the city. Communications as far as emailing it out to everybody, whether it goes into their regular email communication. I have not done anything yet to figure out cost on mailing out, every drop direct mail to 80829, only because I'm going to need print sizing on it and such. Actually, as well as the prints, not the print sizing, but what the print costs will be. So once I have the design together, then I'll lay out the budget for what it'll take, the different dissemination up. You guys can decide what you want to do from there.
Okay, so yes, Barb.
I just wonder, with the rebirth of the new Pikes Peak Journal.
Yeah.
Carol, if we should have a placement of some sort, maybe an abbreviated form,
Like
a notice sort of thing, or something that points to the annual report.
Okay, that's actually a great idea. Mail out and then email with city. So yeah, once I get sort of that first round and we start getting it approved, I think that'll be a great, because we might be able to like repurpose an ad and whatever, for like the design of it. So yeah, that's a great idea, Barb.
Yes.
And probably what I would say to you guys as far as dissemination, I think we may find from a cost perspective that we don't want to drop something in everybody's mailbox. I mean, it's not a huge piece, but just print and mailing could be really expensive if we're doing, I don't know, 5,000 households, because that's probably seems like that's right for Manitou. Plus we'll want to do, business, maybe county commission, just other entities that would get a hold of it. And we might not mail those. We might actually just hand those out. So what I'll probably do is get everything priced, based on the piece as it's done, so that we can figure out where the best bang for the buck is before we decide how it's going to go out.
Thank you. John.
Well, I have two comments. One, if we put the annual report or some version of it in the Pikes Peak Journal, I would suggest that we do it on the issue that includes the school district, because that's disseminated to everybody in the community as opposed to just subscribers.
Okay.
So, and I don't know when that comes out. It seems to be monthly. I subscribe, but I didn't always, and when I didn't, I would get it once in a while. So
I will read Rhonda.
difference.
Okay. Yeah. To Rhonda and find out which one that is, and that'll help inform deadline. One of the things on my to-do list today is to reach back out to Becca and see what her progress is.
The other comment I would make is that I'd like to review the document before it gets printed. I'm interested in being sure that this is a public relations type of document. Not only does it tell what we do and what we've done in the past year, but it maybe has some explanation of why we did the Lathon deal and what we see the benefits of the Lathon deal, because that publicity hasn't been out in the public. And I think we absolutely did the right thing and we removed blight. We set it up for long-term financial gain for the city, and that message needs to be delivered.
Is that, Jim, I'll suspect, I did not read the director's letter. Is that incorporated in the letter, or is that something?
A bit of it is, Carol, and that's why you haven't seen a draft from me, because that was what I was asked for, is that a couple of other URA members take a look at the letter from me and the text itself for exactly this reason. It is, right now, our annual report is a great document for people who understand what a URA is and what it does. It is not a great document for people who have no clue who we are or what we do. So I agree with John that the tone needs to change. The terminology needs to change. It needs to be a lot friendlier and a lot with very plain language in it. So I started that review and add on the letter that I would sign, but it's true that we need to go through the whole document. And that is something that if there are a few of you.
We can't hear you, Debbie.
Yeah, just lost it.
Debbie, we lost you.
I might throw back out, I think where she's headed, and which I think is brilliant, is to have you guys look at it. And my suggestion was even going to be, once you approve it, what I might do before it goes out, if you're okay with it, is route it to, non-governmental friends in Manitou and in other spaces, like maybe 2 people, and just go, do you understand what this is?
I don't know who's hearing who, but
I think it's just with me, Barb.
Marcy and I had a nice conversation with Stan Vanderwerth the other day that we've shared with Denise. I think somehow we wrap him in as our representative for the county in some way, that we kind of push it a little bit into Colorado Springs, maybe through county.
Does it make sense? And maybe it is just you and me, Barb. Does it make sense to ask Stan to write a brief piece about the importance of public-private partnership?
I think that would be a marvelous idea.
I'll reach out to Stan, and then if we have to pull it back out, we can pull it back out.
No, I think we need to do more of pushing our story,
I think so too.
our region, and not just keep talking about it around in circles. In Manitou proper.
Okay, well, this is awkward. But yeah, I guess that's all I have. So maybe the rest, are you and I the only 2 remotely?
No, I see Alan Gregory,
Oh, you're right.
and I see whoever Wendy is. Who is
Okay.
Wendy?
I'm going to put a quick comment in the chat, just saying what you and I talked about. Where the heck is the chat?
Somebody's
Oh.
going over to the equipment, so they must know they've got a problem.
Okay. Oh,
Nice wedding picture. Debbie disappeared, so somebody must be doing something. Oh, there she is. Here comes a helper. But I think that would be, I think it would be interesting, Carol, to reach out to Stan.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give him a call. I was trying, I can't seem to find my chat. I mean, I'm doing it on my phone because my internet's weird today. Because of the rain. So I'll drop an email to Jim and give Stan a call and get working on that, as well as get working on budget stuff and then get back with you.
There's something coming.
Okay, now can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you hear us talking?
There you go. Thank you.
Debbie, did you hear us speaking?
We did hear you speaking, and we have to tell you that there is a disagreement in direction in terms of involving any other elected officials in production of our annual report. So,
Okay.
So we'll want to have that conversation offline, so that we can talk about it a little bit more. But overall, we're liking the idea of making this more of a document that everyone in Manitou could consume, and not just the folks who are in the know.
Okay. I will, as I put it together, I will keep that in mind. I will not reach out to Stan. If you guys decide you want that, let me know, or let me know if there's somebody else you want to get involved. Maybe even a Walker. Oh, a Jariah Walker or a developer that has worked with these, but you guys decide politically what you think is good about that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That would be, Alan Delwich.
Yeah, for the record, I think the idea of a direct mail is a needless expense, and
Okay.
especially with the rebirth of the Pikes Peak Bulletin,
Okay.
that we could put the whole report in the bulletin. I'm sure they would love that if we did that. And there's so many avenues of social media that, postal mail is a 20th century notion that's not, a lot of people see a shiny, glossy thing and they go, another political piece of garbage. They don't even look at it. So I think it's just a waste.
Okay.
It concerns me as well that the look and feel of whatever the publication is has to fit the message, right?
Yep.
Putting out four-color glossy anything to the people of Manitou does not seem to me to be the best possible idea. So yes, if we consider that route, we would look at it carefully. I would be more interested in a piece in the bulletin to every resident
Okay.
in connection with someone else. And who knows how that looks in their current iteration, right? As they're rebirthing the bulletin, when will everyone get the paper and when will it just go to subscribers? All of that, I think, needs to be sorted out. It's Farley.
Why don't we create it? So we'll work on creating something print, and I will do that with an eye towards, really responsible fiscal stewardship. But then why don't we also create it as a link that you guys can email out, we can email out, we can put a QR code or a link in the bulletin, we can put it out on social, we can print a smaller run that can be, again, distributed to kind of the key stakeholders and influencers, that might only be 100 copies that go to, government, business, whoever else, but that the wider distribution comes out of a digital environment.
Yes, that sounds like a better strategy to me. Farley had a comment.
So I believe that the first community-wide paper is being distributed in June. Because I have an ad going in it and they said it was June. I feel very certain. Yeah, okay, good. And I was thinking that maybe the URA could even purchase a page And so with the annual report, but then maybe do some softer pieces around it, like something about the sculptures that are going in, because that would be a month out from that distribution. And that would be like, you're talking about trying to bring the community into what the URA has been doing. So if we had maybe a picture of Wild Contemplation and some verbiage about the sculptures and the Day of Friendship, ribbon cutting or something like that.
Okay. I could certainly shift to that. So I'll reach out and get some ad prices, and maybe we can even structure it to have several weeks in a row or every other week over a period of time to focus on different pieces of content rather than a formal report. Or it could end up being a little bit of both, and that what it looks like in the paper is headlines or previews of the deeper content, directing to the more in-depth, but that the ads themselves are much more like, short bullet points of here's the cool things that have been happening. Here's how we've been investing your dollars.
Comments, questions?
I'll make 2 comments. First of all, I think we need to be cognizant of who our audience is and write to that audience. I'm reminded of a comment that a professor in graduate school made to us planning students, and that was, no offense, Nancy, speak to council as if they have a 5th grade education. And, we're not talking to the knowledgeable people in the community. We're talking to the average Joe who doesn't understand what we do and needs to. And so that they can be informed, basically. And in order to do that, you have to speak at their level. And so our communication needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments? Questions for Carol? Yes, Barb.
I think mixed in with that as well, though, there should be a way to have a piece or a link that helps entities like Paragon and other people that we're trying to recruit into our community have a reasonable sales promo piece to help educate them about what it is to be a partner in our community in various ways. So I think it also needs a little bit of a form in that regard as a solicitation piece.
Okay. So the report itself might be more of that kind of big, here's the cool stuff we've done. Here's why you'd want to invest here.
Right.
Here's what's happening in Manitou. That the ads in the bulletin, again, we can direct them to the piece where they can get the bigger picture, but it's like the ads in the bulletin to shorthand are maybe, hey, aren't you proud of your cool little community? Look at this great stuff we're doing, that sort of thing. So it's almost like 2 layered, that the general public is seeing it in social media and whatever else. And I can work with Amy to craft those social media messages to drive to the ads, but then, because actually those may be digital as well, but then also to drive to the report. So it's like layers. You can enter at, oh, look at that really cool sculpture. Look at the streets cleaner, or well, how do I get involved? How are they spending my money? What does this look like? Do I invest? So I almost multi-layered.
So
I have to comment. I disagree, Barb. I think that your idea is great and we need to make that communication, but I don't think this is the right tool. So I think the communication with the community that may do development or redevelopment, Paragon, is different than what we're trying to accomplish with this document.
Well, I just think this is an opportunity to have information and literature as much as possible telling our community story. And I think this is just one other piece of that in some way.
Yeah, as I recall our discussion last month, where we landed, last month, where Where we landed was that we decided to move forward with an annual report right away because we wanted to get a message out to the community about what it is that we do and why it's important. And then we were coming back to the table once that was produced and out to talk about the rest of Carol's proposed update, refresh to the communication plan so that we could talk about all these other different messaging opportunities, like how do you speak to developers about opportunities? How do you speak with property owners about existing property owners about opportunities? Those kinds of things. That's the way that I recall that we left this the last time. Am I characterizing that correctly? So right now we're just focusing on the annual report and then we're coming back probably at our June meeting, unless this has not been wrapped up by then, but I hope that it has, to talk about the rest of the communication plan.
That's what I recall as well, and I like that approach. Start with the one piece, because the bulletin is not going to have continued runs right now. They're going to be laying out a plan. They don't have it in place. So I think we should just focus on June. And as you were saying earlier, really modifying the annual report to speak to the community. Include the numbers, because there are people that really care about that, obviously, but I think soften it and round it out and buy a whole page as support for the bulletin.
How does that sound as a strategy in the short run? That's the format that the annual report takes and it goes in the all community issue of the bulletin, if we can make that happen. So Carol, that means that's your first call is to the bulletin to figure out what that looks like and how we could meet that deadline.
Yeah.
And then from there.
Yeah. But I'll continue to collect the content so that I've got something. Once they say, if they say it's from 2 weeks, that pulls up our deadline, which I don't think it'll happen that quickly.
Yes. Are there a couple of you that would be willing to work with Carol offline to make this happen? To be responsible for looking at content and giving her input from our perspective? John is raising his hand. Anyone else? Marcy is willing to take a look as well. And of course I'm going to, because I'm already in it.
Yeah. And I'll float that through Jim, but I've made a note for those 3 folks to be kind of the leads on it.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Anything else about this topic? Okay. Carol, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Facade grant revisions. Jim.
Okay, so I sent out, albeit late, kind of a revamp of the facade, and I changed it to facade and site improvement grants, because I've had some inquiries from other property owners about, well, can we do more than just fix up the face of the building? And we've done that. I mean, I think with Sheldon's, we added some fencing, and so I think, it might be time to change the nature of this. So I would welcome your comments on it. I, gave a description. Probably the biggest thing here is how much money do you want to dedicate to this? And I think I put in there 20,000. And that is, just a wag at this point. Somebody at the last board meeting said something between 10 and 20, and I just put a number in there. So I'd like to have more discussion on that. And any other comments you might have as far as what the application, if we want to change that at all. The second page of the application, there's a section called General Conditions. I would like to send that to David Neville and have him go through it, and he probably will bleed all over it, which is fine. But we want to make sure we cover our bases on that. So comments?
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, one thing I noticed in the old grant program, we did stipulate it was not retroactive. I think that's a condition that makes sense.
Does anyone have an objection to that? It sounds like a reasonable request to me. Okay, John?
I'd like to talk about the dollar amount. I think 20,000 is too low, but I don't think we should put a cap on it either. I think if our purpose here is to encourage people to do something, right? And so we need to have it somewhat open-ended, and we need to be flexible enough that if we have the finances, or if we can convince council that we need additional money to make a major contribution to a business that will return tax dollars to the city, we ought to be able to do that. And so I prefer not to cap it. In discussions, Jim, that you have with potential applicants, you could encourage them to apply if they need 50,000 or 80,000 or whatever, and we can discuss it. And I think that they also need to have some skin in the game. So it's not 100% grant. It needs to be some amount less than that.
And, I did check out, I think it was Longmont has a program, and they have a sliding scale depending on how much money you ask for, what percentage they would go in as a match. That's one thought. I liked your idea. 50% match would be, I think, ideal. Because you're right. I mean, you don't want to just give money away. You want to have them make a commitment.
In the Longmont case, how did a sliding scale work?
Boy, I'd have to go into detail. Like I said, I think the more you ask for, the percentage of their match went down.
Got it. Okay. Alan? Gregory, yes.
What's Nancy's take on this with regard to council? I mean, are they going to second guess this?
My knee-jerk reaction is probably, but I hesitate to guess at this point, particularly until after the work session that we have.
I'd hate to announce something and then have council come back at us.
I mean, there's pros and cons either way, and depending on how it's laid out.
Yes.
I mean, there's a definite economic investment here, but council has been somewhat deaf to the economic
Well,
investment.
I asked that question out of recent history, but as an operating URA, I'm clearly in favor of putting something like this out there and supporting it, because that's what we're supposed to do and what we were designed to do. I just want to be sure that, or I wanted to get this particular burr under my saddle out in front so that we're aware that, we might get second guessed again.
Yeah,
And we just have to be prepared for that. I'm not saying it's the reason not to do it. I'm just saying we need to be prepared.
I agree.
Yes, excellent point. And
So I think to the extent that we had a cap, it would be less likely that they would second guess it. They're probably going to be very nervous about an uncapped grant. But we probably should think more about that. And then I didn't get a chance to thoroughly read the document, but the question might be, do we limit how often a property can ask for a grant? Do we say only one time a year? You have to wait 2 years. I think we ought to think about that.
yes, if there could be stepped improvements, if someone could lay out a plan for multiple years, for example, and knew that if they reached a cap, they could phase their project in, that would be one way of kind of spreading the wealth, but also having a budgeted idea of how much this would cost us, right, overall. So that would be one way to accomplish what John's talking about, getting some bigger improvements done. I don't know if any of you have costed out any of these items, but they are very, very expensive, at least 3 times what I expected them to be. So, so the idea of how much is available in the fund for each grant, I think it's going to sway some property owners to go ahead and submit an application, right? Like there would need to be a sizable investment on our part, maybe higher than $20,000.
And back to the one example that I had, they did list in their application the maximum amount of money that they had available to give out for grants in 1 year. That's a thought too. You could limit it just by doing that. The other question I had, Ann, was the Longmont one, and I don't know how overlapping things are, but they had some requirement that if you were working on a structure that was so many years old, and I can't remember what it was, 1950s, you had to go to the Historic Advisory Board and get their blessing. And I don't know if that's something that applies here or not.
There's only one property in the historic district, and that's El Colorado Lodge.
It is actually not on the list of historic places.
But it is in the
It
historic
is.
district. It's a property within the historic district.
It actually isn't. It was excluded in the final application. If you go to the historic register, the El Colorado Lodge is not on it.
Yeah, that's a different thing than being in the historic district.
Okay, you're right.
It
It
is
is
in the Manitou Springs
historic district. That's
Yeah,
true,
without a doubt, yes.
but
And
not
if
on the
they-
National
No
Register.
matter what they would propose doing, if it affects the external, it will go planning and perhaps to the HPC,
Okay,
without a doubt.
okay. So depending on the scope of the improvements, those improvements might go before other bodies like the Planning Commission or Historic Preservation. Yes, depending on whatever the scope of the project is, you may have to go through other requirements. Yes, Barb?
I just wonder if we ought to be proactive in some way. Jim, in terms of actually going along the corridor and having conversations with various property owners, and just trying to elicit the opportunity for grants and promote the opportunity for grants and actually get them thinking about what they might do. In other words, that we're very intentional about, kind of who's in the game. And that might lead us to the size and scope of grant considerations. In other words, that we're proactive about it in terms of encouraging improvement.
I did send out a letter earlier this year, basically to that point. And I did get several property owners coming back to me saying, hey, we might want to do something. I haven't gotten anything specific yet. One was the Santa Fe Motel. The other was Emerald Fields, believe it or not. And I haven't gotten anything specific from those guys yet, but we have reached out a little bit. I don't know, going door to door would be effective or not.
It may be that those of us with relationships with owners along the avenue could also reach out individually and just suss this out, because it seems to me that having a staff person go and make the inquiry is different than any of us going and having a more casual conversation with folks about what might be possible for them to do.
So could we, Jim, could you put together a prospect list? How about that we could think about along the corridor, and then we could figure out the best way to approach different entities?
Sure, I've got a spreadsheet that has all the names and ownerships, emails that I have. Mostly I have addresses because the main source for the information was the county assessor.
And then we haven't talked about the the complex with the Chinese restaurant? Do we know what's going on in that little corner at all, if anything?
Yeah, I've had repeated conversations with the owner of that, actually his nephew, Abe Say, over the last couple of years. And he seems to get interested in it and get excited about it, and then he just doesn't seem to follow through. And he actually owns Bo's Diners as well.
I mean, to me, that's kind of a specific target area as well, and it's the entry to our bridge and all kinds of things. So maybe that's kind of how you start thinking about who's a target and how we might have more active conversation about what we might partner in a little bit.
Yes, that was our focus a few years back before the pandemic, Barb. And that was exactly our thinking, is that if we concentrated on one part of the avenue with redevelopment ideas, that would be most effective. Thus, the reason for Jim's continued conversations with Abe. So it would be good to go back to that source again. That makes sense. And
Especially if we're willing to promote a more sizable grant in particular, it might be a little more intriguing.
So Jim, remind us, do you do a quarterly letter to the property owners?
No, I don't. I just did an annual letter.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I got some calls on that and seemed to have some interest. Like I said, the two that I've got haven't really followed through. And one thing that would be important, I think the owners of the Emerald Fields were actually considering a lot of improvements, really. And so I would ask them to give me a list and kind of give me a cost estimate to try to scale this a little bit, just to see if that made sense. But I haven't gotten that yet.
Marcy.
I think with some of these owners, they need a lot of encouragement to move forward and make some changes. With the economy being and that doesn't even matter even when the economy is good, they just need a lot of constant encouragement to go over there and say, how are you doing? What are your thoughts? Have you heard do you have some new ideas? I think you can't just hit them once a year or twice a year and expect them to fall into line. That's number one. Number two, I think that, and this may be disagreeable in terms, no, it's probably too optimistic. That would be the better word, but having them, if we say Emerald Fields comes in with 3 or 4 improvements, and we as a group look at them, talk to them, approve of the changes, etc. Is it absolutely necessary that we go back and then they have to go through the dance of the planning commission or whatever? Or are our recommendations good enough for the city council? I don't know. I don't know we've ever done that before. And I'm looking at you, Nancy, because you have a sense of it.
Yeah,
I
would
mean, they may not approve of it, but
I would think initially it would just be based on the land use code and our other codes, that if it has to go to planning or historic preservation commission, council doesn't get involved that much in those sorts of, unless it's really, major or minor plan.
well, I didn't know whether, if they wanted to change, build out 10 more feet or to change the parking lot configuration.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion to have with Hannah.
Well, because
I
I
would
think that
defer to
if I
Alan.
were the owner and I heard I had to go through planning commission, I have to go through, well, I don't know if they'd have to go through, they wouldn't have to go through historic preservation, but for instance, the one on Becker's, that might certainly, those are old buildings, that may need it. I think these are things we need to consider as we get to that point. I'm just saying that if I were the owner of a property, which I haven't done anything with in 30 or 40 years, and nobody seems to mind that I haven't, do I want to start that process? And there's some great stories here in town about businesses who have tried that route and they haven't been too successful. So I don't know that they would want it. Oh, I bet I have to go and hire an attorney and I'm going to have to do this and that. You turn them off right away.
Marcy, again, I think it would have to go to Hannah, but I find it very hard to believe that the city would relinquish their authority in that regard.
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw the heads nodding. Yeah, I'm just asking the question because I think that is one of our problems. It's a fundamental problem. Because you have owners of property who have been here for years and years. And they haven't done much with their properties. We all know that. And to get them started on a process where they're going to have to go through they're going to, in their mind, jump through a lot of hoops is not appealing to them.
Yeah.
Just a fact of life.
thank you. John?
Yeah,
And then Alan?
I've had some discussion with Hannah about that. And I know she's trying to streamline that process. I agree that I don't think the city would relinquish the review authority that they currently have. The only change that might benefit that type of property owner is if there are some things that could be reviewed and approved administratively rather than going through the hearing process. And I can't remember if that language was added to the new land use code or not. It's often added to language to land use codes. And there are parameters to that, what the staff can and can't do, but I don't know if it was done. I didn't look at it from that standpoint, so I don't know if it was done in this instance.
There's a whole table, I'm sorry. There's a whole table in the land use code that clearly lays out who has what authority and there is administrative authority in some cases.
In some cases.
Yeah.
Right? Mhm.
Yes, Alan?
Yeah, I'll just, on that topic, we've done a lot of relaxation of requirements. A lot more things can be done with the staff review. And generally, any kind of land use change, whether it's a business in the URA or a homeowner anywhere, you start by talking to the planning department and they'll say, oh, you want a variance to, you want to get, change a setback, you want excessive height, whatever, you go through a process and hearing, but many things now can be done at the staff level, including parking. We made it much more flexible for commercial properties with their parking.
Good.
And just on another thing that, we're talking about these facade improvement or site improvement, so on. To me, the notion is economic development, urban renewal. I wonder if there's some point where a successful enterprise doesn't need help. To me, the idea of handing over 40 or 50,000 to someone who's raking in 5 or 6 million a year is ludicrous. I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I think, we're drunk on our funds if we think that that's a good use of citizens' funds. We think of like, oh, we're the URA and we can do whatever we want, but the fundamental thing is this is tax revenue. And I really can't support the notion of giving some very successful enterprise more money when they've got plenty of money to take care to fix their roof, to do their painting, to fix their gutters. And, I think we have to be really cautious on how we do it, or it'll be one more argument for why do we have this URA? What are they doing with the citizens' funds?
So it sounds to me, Alan, like you're advocating for review criteria that speaks to the issue of what kind of economic growth would be generated with the improvements, or what the owner or tenant would see as the benefit back to the community for doing these improvements, something like that, so that we could distinguish between the types of projects that might land on the desk as grant funding. What was that? It was. Sorry, folks, we're getting interference. What is it? Oh, there's some sort of alarm that's telling us we need to leave the building. Oh, she was kidding.
Yeah, it does.
Why would police dispatch come through here? Interesting.
Oh, I'd comment. I mean, I agree in part with Alan. I think there needs to be a criteria where we look at the financial, or someone knowledgeable looks at the financials of the applicant and says whether or not they can make the improvements that are proposed in their current financial situation or not. But there might be some overriding criteria as well. And even if they can, but wouldn't, unless they got the grant, there may be a reason to approve the grant. So to me, the review criteria are critical. You know, at one point in time, and maybe Alan Gregory performs this function, but there was a banker on the board who looked at that type of information and determined whether or not the grant was appropriate or not based on the financials of the applicant.
And I have no problem with that approach. I'm just saying that you're going to get that kind of feedback, and we have to, and I think having the criteria that Alan is talking about is reasonable. In fact, I think there was a plan here, and I think it was before Alan was on the board. Didn't we have a plan, and it came forward to our board a few years ago, and we determined that we would not accept it because he didn't want to put any, the owner did not want to hardly put any money into it. There was one project, it never flew. But we had that
I
discussion.
think we had a discussion about doing a new URA at one time on the West End. And we were going to require that the applicant put some skin in the game as far as doing the blight study. But I don't recall anything specific to a particular project.
I know we had.
You know,
some
and I think
discussion.
my reaction to all that is, man, this is getting really complicated and you're going to turn a lot of people off. I think I'm kind of leaning back to a cap on the amount we give out, just for that very reason. Because, you know, when we get into a big project where there's a lot of money involved and a lot of tax increment generated, then I sit down and I go through the whole pro forma and I do their economic analysis and all that, just to see if they, you know, what's their return on investment. And I just don't see doing that for somebody that wants 20 grand.
So you're distinguishing between a real developer's agreement, right? This is, now we're talking about redevelopment of a property, which is what Emerald Fields might in fact be talking about, is some bigger redevelopment opportunity and not something that would fit under a facade grant or a site improvement grant. Is that the distinction?
Yeah, I agree with that. This is not that kind of program. This is a small grant program, kind of like what HPC has done for a number of years. We would never look at the financial condition of the homeowner or business that asks us for a small grant. So I don't think we want to go down that route. I think we keep it small and we make it simple, or we don't do it, is my view.
Yes, Alan.
I'm curious, for the HPC, what was the scope like?
Smallish. I think it was started at 2 and maybe went to 10, but small. Yes. And I think this should be small, frankly.
Comments?
I'd like to see enough flexibility to go to at least 50. And maybe there's a cap and then, and when we review it and it's above that amount, we make an adjustment. I'm okay with doing it that way.
How about the rest of you? Yes, Alan.
I'm more in line with Ann, somewhere between 2 and 10,000.
I think I'd like to make it, the reason I'm saying that is because we were not, I remember the discussion that we felt we were going to be overwhelmed with owners who want 10, maybe a small amount to, I don't know, 2, 5, 10,000. And we were not overwhelmed because in so many cases, they needed a lot of work. Now, I am not saying, I'm not in favor of huge amounts, but I'm saying that I would like to say it's between 2 and 20,000 or up to 20,000, period. Just to throw out another number and see if we have any compromise between 2 and 10 and something that keeps it wider, the
Yes.
opening wider as John wants.
Well, I would be fine with what Jim has proposed, the 20,000.
How about the rest of you?
Up to 20.
Barb?
I'm good with 20. I mean, if anybody even tries to do a small home improvement job these days, you know how what things cost. And I mean, if you're going to make anything practical in terms of incentive, it's got to be a little more substantial than it certainly has been. So I agree with up to 20 at this juncture.
Yes, Alan.
Just to clarify, are we talking matching or just a flat grant?
The way it's written is matching. So you can apply for 40 and say, I'm going to come to the table with 20 and you can ask us for 20. That would be nice.
So you could do a $40,000 project. You're putting in 20, we're putting in 20.
I'll just, from the perspective of what we've seen at HPC, and again, with very small, like $2,000 to $10,000 grants, most of the projects we've seen, they're spending 10 times that much. Much bigger projects, but they get from us 2 or 10,000, whatever yeah. And that seems to be, for some reason, I'm not sure why, that seems to be a bit of an incentive.
Because I haven't been on the board as long, I don't have any experience with except the dearth of grant applications we got when I was first on the board and we had an active grant program and no one was applying because it just wasn't enough money for anyone to do improvements that were significant enough, I think. But I don't have any data about that. Do any of the rest of you have any data about why people weren't applying? And those grants were how much? 2,000?
Well,
for
another reason to update the
Sheldon's.
form, the application, I think, says 2 and the description says 1.
Okay. So we would be going from 2,000 to 20,000 and hoping that we get more takers. That's what we're really proposing here. And we give it a try and we see what happens. What about those businesses that would want to do a multi-year approach? Would we cap the 20,000? You can only apply once every other year, or we just leave that open-ended so that if folks had a phased approach and wanted to come back and apply for 20 grand for 4 years in a row, that would be all right.
think you need to at least limit it to one a year, but beyond that, I think you leave it open-ended. So you can't have two in 1 year, but it doesn't prevent you from coming back year after year after year.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable? You know, I want to make one tiny amendment, and that is this. Because we have landscaping in this facade improvement, or I would facade and site improvement grant. One thing that I would like to do is to try to encourage property owners to plant native plants and plant pollinators. So I would say for those proposing landscaping improvements, if we could either up the match, that we would perhaps match up to 75% of the portion of the improvements that would be about landscaping in order to encourage planting of pollinators instead of more Fitzers or just trees or something like that, that we try to do something like that. But if that makes it too complicated, I'm cool with just leaving it as it is and seeing what we get. But I think continuing to promote the things that we're trying to promote in redevelopment of the avenue would be a good gesture on our part, and a good gesture about thinking about this as an extension of the whole community, right? That we're trying to promote the entire community's values.
I'm sorry, I try not to engage, but since this city was just named as the first pollinator district in the world, I would say that pollinators would be a requirement in landscaping. And there's people in town who would assist with any landscaping plans in that regard. Just a thought.
Okay, so are we going to get into business of reviewing landscape plans? I prepare landscape plans for a living, guys, and you guys aren't qualified.
We don't want to be the reviewers, Jim. I'm just saying if there was a way to incentivize, I don't know that I would want to regulate it, but at least incentivize that kind of use, that would be a good thing for us to do. Maybe we just write it as an encouraging comment in the application.
That's
You
what
get-
yeah.
You get points for planting native plants and or pollinator plants, something like that. How does that sound?
I just think it's part of, just a statement in the grant program, not a requirement, but an encouragement and a recommendation.
Okay. Other comments? Should we have Jim write this up and we review it again in June?
Yeah, I can redline it and try to add things in there, and hopefully I captured what everybody was in agreement with. The other thing I'd like to say is I think following up with this, with a letter including all this to all the property owners after we get it approved, would be another way to encourage folks to start to participate. So I think, one step at a time, but let's get this done, and then let's mail it out or hand it out. We can do that.
Yes, that's a great idea. And you will have David look at the language for the application. Okay. Any other comments? Are we giving this as direction to Jim for the moment, and then we'll do a formal motion to approve at our next meeting? Does that sound fair? Thank you. Nancy, your report.
Thanks. Let's see, last week we approved the city to buy 2 trams, electric trams, to work more on public transportation and do a pilot program on looking at how they work within the city and how we can build on that program in the future. Pretty exciting. You talked about the June 13th work session. And again, I would just encourage as many URA board members to attend as possible. I think that was very helpful last time. Soda Springs Park plan was represented and got a lot more support this time. So another very expensive project that the city is undertaking, but it's been a long time in the works. So we'll see how that goes. I know last time at your last meeting, I said I would bring up the property, the land along the creek to council, and I did not do that rather intentionally because I didn't want, it was the same meeting as we had the URA and I didn't want to talk about it. But I will tell you that Judith Chandler did bring it up. So, and it did not go anywhere. The mayor did not want to discuss it further at that point in time. So I don't know if it'll come back up again or not. Brought up about the Pikes Peak Bulletin. They had their kickoff meeting last night for the community. Great attendance, great food from Farley, and very, very great deal of excitement from the city. So it's exciting. And lastly, Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority, where council has taken a really in-depth look at what's happening with Pikes Peak Regional Transportation Authority, and that we found out through some analysis that the city, I think 13 or 15 of the last 18 years that we've been a member, or the total 18 years that we've been a member of the PPRTA, we have put in more than we have gotten out by a significant margin. So staff and the mayor were given the direction to go and talk to the PPRTA staff and board and fellow members of the PPRTA with the goal of trying to get more capital dollars up front to kind of look at how to make up some of that differential, as well as to look at how we can not feel like we're giving that much more than we're getting in the future. So there's a theme there if anyone notices. It is problematic. The amount was really dramatic. So anyway, that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I have a question. And it's about PPRTA you're talking about.
Yeah.
When it was initiated, the whole point was that the smaller communities would be evened out in terms of how much money is going to the smaller communities versus the bigger ones.
It goes by the A and B projects for the capital projects, and it's done purely on a regional basis. And Anne is a CAC member, and she can tell you that their recommendations and the board recommendations have been done purely on what they look at it purely as the regional. On the other hand, the maintenance dollars are divvied up by population in accordance with the population. So that's more equitable. And then transit is 10% of the dollars. And we I think have done better with transit. So does that answer your question, Marcy? They've historically they've tried to kind of divvy it up capital based on population as well. But that's not a requirement. The maintenance is a requirement at this point to do it by population. The capital is not. But it's my understanding that no one had looked at this, who was a receiver and who was a giver in the past. And we ended up doing that analysis, and it was eye-opening. So anyway. It was what, over $1 million?
Well, and they are still refining those numbers.
Still refining the numbers.
They had never been asked to look at it this way, and understanding they're going back in the distant history with a staff that's completely different than it was back then. It's, I think, been a difficult task. And so I don't think there are good numbers yet in terms of how much sales tax in excess of what Manitou got back in allocations is accurate. At the moment, the intergovernmental agreement does indicate that both maintenance and capital are allocated under population.
No, capital is not.
Capital, they have the flexibility, but for the last 10 years,
Oh,
it's been
by
allocated
practice, it's been by
by
population,
population.
but by IGA, no.
So they are, for the last 10 years for PPRTA 2, both have been allocated based on population. And I think the argument that was made, and it's a good one, is Manitou has no ability to grow and all the other jurisdictions, the big ones, do. And maybe that needs to be
Right.
looked at more closely. So I think that's the big argument, really.
Yeah, and also, yeah, because we, PPRTA is looking at other jurisdictions to potentially join. Fountain is particularly interested and they actually were present the other night. So it's a brand new thing that just no one has really looked at, and it requires a lot. And that was another thing that was, most of council did agree that needed more, to look at it some more. So that was very good as opposed to making any quick judgments. So anyway. John?
When you mentioned the Creek property, are you talking about the Martin property?
Yeah.
Can you share what the discussion options are?
No, it was just Judith brought up that there was interest in the from OSAC for that property.
Mhm.
And at the time, we were looking at the URA, and if there's another pot of money that the council might, dip into, and how that money could be used. But that wasn't stated. I have to make it very clear that wasn't stated.
Sure.
But it was done the same night as we had the URA discussion. So it was not really discussed. It was just brought up, should there be a discussion on this Creek property or not? And the mayor was not interested in putting it on the agenda in the near term.
Okay.
So it's not being discussed per se. But I thought it was interesting after I had said I would bring it up that Judith did bring it up. Councilor Chandler brought it up.
Well, I mean, here's my concern. I don't think this Parks Department's doing a good maintenance job, and why would they acquire additional land if they can't maintain what they have?
Yeah, and I don't think it's at all appropriate for an OSAC for an open space. If it were anything, it would be parks, or you and I had discussed the potential for a temporary surface parking. So we didn't even get into any of that discussion at all. It was just raised up as something to discuss in the future. So that's the only reason.
If I had my druthers, I'd say the parking enterprise ought to buy it and create another parking lot there, which would provide economic incentive perhaps for the Jade Dragon and the Park Row, because there'd be additional parking right by those two properties. So.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing, not as a council rep, just as a Ward 2 representative, if you're looking at Emerald Fields, and there's an issue with the sign, the enter sign is so tiny, you don't even see it till you're past it. And as a Ward 2 representative, I get more complaints about people going up Crystal Hills Boulevard there than anything else from my ward, that part of my ward. So, we had brought it up with them before. I thought we were going to see some changes, and I don't know, we have a whole sign ordinance, and I'm not sure what came of that, but nothing, well, I know nothing came of it. So there's still this tiny little sign, and people still, and it does put people at risk for accidents, and it really irritates that community, and I understand why. So I'll just throw that out.
It is a problem. I can attest to that. Other comments or questions for Nancy? Okay, moving on to other business. Any items of other business? Hearing none, motion to, I'm sorry, Jim has an item.
Again, we continue to have issues with this remote meeting thing, and I'm just going to ask if you want to continue this format, or is there something else you want to try? Do you want to go back to the Zoom meeting? So just throwing it out there.
When are they starting work in that hall?
It's the work in the building has started, but my understanding is that it won't affect the hall very much. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah, it should not affect our ability to continue to meet here.
My comment is, I think it's appropriate that we meet here, but the technical issues are a problem, and I don't know if they can be solved or not. So
Yes. Alan,
I prefer to meet here. I like this format better, and I think the technical problems are getting better, and, you know, we're learning as we go. And one thing, if we were to ever go back to the Zoom meeting, we have to be really diligent. The special meeting, I had a neighbor that tried to get in and they sat in the waiting room for 20 minutes and they weren't let in. So I think, you know, I'm skeptical of the effectiveness of Zoom only at this time.
but that would be my concern as well, Alan, is that I like this format because we know that the city runs the Zoom and that it is available to anyone. And that we have, that it is recorded, right? So then our meetings are available to everyone. And that's something that we haven't been able to do if we run our own Zoom meetings. So I would like to continue in this format. And truly, if I'm the only one sitting here running the tech by myself, I'm good with that. It does not, because I think for good transparency, this is the way we should be getting the job done. So that's where I sit with it. Is there anyone who would like to make a change and go back to Zoom only? Nancy,
Another thing that the city passed on Tuesday is a resolution eliminating the emergency resolution for COVID, and also passing a resolution for remote participation and remote meetings. And I read it the other day and now I can't remember the details. I just know that I liked what it said, and I believe it's to get back to in person, and that remote participation is a privilege, not an expectation.
thank you. Another community value, right? It's stated for all of us. So I do think we keep this format. And, but that does not mean that you have to be here in person. You always have the opportunity to participate by Zoom, and we continue to manage the technical difficulties as best we can, including the ghosting audio from wherever that is occurring.
Judy thought that that had something to do with transferring some of the stuff from the old council chambers. They're doing something weird in there, so she's hoping that's what it was. But yeah, since Judy is right there and is very responsive, I think that's helpful and a consideration.
Thank you. Okay, any other items of other business? A motion to adjourn, please. So moved by Alan, a second? Second by Ann. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you all so much. We'll see you in June.